And one of the things I want to start off with, Alice, is just how you got into, I guess, fitness to start, and then you took it all the way to the best part, to be able to teach other people about it. So tell me a little bit about how you got started and how you got involved.
Hmm. Well, similar story to yours, actually. I think everyone sort of gets into some sort of passion often with a personal story.
Hmm.
My father had COPD, which is a lung condition, not heart.
Hmm.
But I was really, really interested in how exercise could help people like that with chronic conditions. Out of high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I actually did fitness and health first. So I went to college, did really well, went to Humber College, and then, sorry, went on to Guelph Humber. And then when I was there, I did a placement in cardiac rehab
Hmm.
at Toronto Rehab. And I just sort of like never looked back. I really, really loved the field. I wanted to know more. So I went on to do my master's at UBC. Again, still really enjoyed the work. So then I came back to Toronto Rehab to do my PhD, continuing
Hmm.
in cardiac rehab.
Which will be done very shortly. And tell us a little bit about that. Like, what's your area of interest? What did you? I guess what's your thesis in a sense?
Yeah. So my thesis was all of my undergrad, master's, and PhD work was all in the field of cardio-oncology. So I studied how does breast cancer therapy affect the heart, and then how can cardiac rehab be a service to sort of help mitigate some of these effects for these women.
Hmm.
As I got into my PhD work, I started to learn that we actually can't get them into rehab. Like we can't, the referral process within our healthcare system doesn't allow cancer survivors to access cardiac rehab. So I sort of am developing more like healthcare planning or policy around how do we support these women sort of long term.
Hmm.
That's what my research has been in. My sort of passion, I guess, side passion project is I'm really interested in like high intensity interval training for people with heart conditions,
Hmm.
and specifically really working with the sick people. So people with LVAD, so like devices, or people who have heart failure.
Hmm. That actually really piques my interest because, sort of a personal story. My dad, after he had a heart attack, had to do a lot of walking, a lot of cardio rehab in that sense. And then at some point, they just cut him loose. But I think along the way, he had this, I guess, fear about doing anything more than walking. And when you tell me like high intensity interval training, like, I'm like, okay, that means that they can still do stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's probably the most rewarding part is you get these people who are so scared like your father to do anything because a heart attack affects the heart, right? And they
Hmm.
get chest pain and all of these sort of um, symptoms even after surgery. So to get them from being scared to I'm going to make you do high intensity interval training and they're like almost like their joy is
Hmm.
probably the coolest part about the job.
Hmm.
And that's why I've always sort of tried to stay clinical.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what did you find, I guess, from your studies and your passion? Like, what did you find maybe was the gap from what was being taught to what's possible? Like, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I was very, very fortunate that I always had a hand in cardiac rehab going through school. But
Mhm.
I'm now on the other side where I'm actually teaching a lot of students. So I'm a TA. I teach a lot of lab components for undergrad as well as graduate students at
Mhm.
the University of Toronto. And I'm also a supervisor for the University of Western now, like as a clinical placement person. Um, and I find that there's just a huge disconnect in if you look at like a case study in school, it's always like this person has heart disease, diabetes, and they're obese. But when you actually work with people with heart conditions, it's much more complex. Like they
Mhm.
can have arrhythmias, they can have, like I said, devices are very popular or common. And there's just, I don't find that there's that translation of like what actually happens in clinic to what students are being taught.
Mhm.
And I think you need to get like personal experience to really see what that is like.
So your mind shifted working with people compared to maybe what you were taught in school.
Absolutely.
And
It's
is it?
yeah, it's a job that I think you can't really learn through school. You have
Mhm.
to do it.
Mhm. And how does that sort of affected or molded your thought process with helping people?
Um, with helping people or students.
You know what? Let's go there first. Like, so you would teach these students differently than you were taught, right?
I would like
Okay, let's go
I
there.
I think that the university needs a lot more like real case studies. Like, this is what a patient actually looks like. This is what a stress test looks like. How do you actually prescribe to these people? Because that's what the students really don't know how to do when they
Hmm.
get out of school. So that's why I have sort of signed up to be this like placement coordinator or supervisor, because I feel like the students need that like hands-on experience.
Hmm.
So that's how I would help them. In terms of patients, I don't really know how it would change how I would help them. I would say
Hmm.
I'm a little bit more on the risky side in terms of like what I'm willing to do with the patients.
Hmm.
But that's because I learned from the best at Toronto Rehab for 3 years doing, like I said, high intensity interval training with heart failure. Um, I actually did high intensity interval training with someone who had an LVAD, which is a mechanical heart. So they have a fixed cardiac output if you want to go like into the sciencey stuff.
Hmm.
So when they exercise, their cardiac output doesn't go up.
Hmm.
So like, how do you get a training response out of them?
Yeah.
And we were able to improve
Really?
through that. And so I'm like, well, if I can do hit training with a guy with a mechanical heart, I can probably exercise most people that come across.